The nature of when I say being anti-slavery does not mean that you are not a racist or bigoted. We're going to look at, lastly, for this lecture, two matters on that subject. And the first is the idea of the American Colonization Society and the foundation of Liberia. Namely, there are a huge number of white people in the North that think that blacks are inferior. They're not as smart. They smell. They're more violent. They're sexual deviants. Common racist and bigoted opinions of the time. And they decide that despite all of that, slavery, breaking up families, mutilation, whippings, it's all beyond the pale. It is inhuman and is degrading not just to the black soul, but to the white soul as well. So the humane thing to do is to free the blacks and then send them back to Africa. And they succeed at sending 13,000 free black folks back to Africa, speaking a different language, worshiping a different religion, not really knowing anything about Liberia. And this is where things get super tragic. And I come back to race is strictly a cultural and societal creation. It isn't real because Liberia, the story of Liberia is a tragic one. The groups that went to Liberia don't really intermix or become part of the population. They become a ruling class caste that sits above them, the Americo-Liberian ethnicity, which is distinct, speaking English instead of the local dialects, and not worshiping Islam or the fetishistic beliefs, and not intermarrying with them either. They declare independence from the United States and are allowed to in 1847, because good riddance, what, right? If you're white 19th century folks. And they dominate all political power. They don't allow the locals to vote. They don't even allow them to get birthright citizenship until 1904. In 1865, they passed what's called the Port of Entry Act, which means that there's always has to be an Americo-Liberian middleman between local traders and European or American traders, meaning that they're just skimming money and embezzling everything off the top and keeping the locals into an artificial pit of destitution and poverty. And they basically end up treating the Americo-Liberians basically end up treating the Native Africans like white settlers treated Native Americans throughout their history, with different, like, basically concentration camps, massacres, brush wars, and it's incredibly tragic and incredibly gross. Shows you the dangers of the 19th century and just how elites in general treat those they see as lesser themselves, and how easy it is for one group to flip from the oppressed to the oppressors. And our last topic for today is ethnology and the birth of eugenics. I'm not going to go into huge detail here because I don't really want to give credit or attention to those who created it. But ethnology started off in Europe, basically as an excuse for different European civilization, great powers, to look down on other lesser powers. The idea that you can compare different civilizations at different times in their history against one another and determine which ones are better and which ones are worse, which then turned into being able to compare the individuals and their cultures against one another outside of the context of their time, which eventually turned into eugenics, basically doing to biology what ethnology did to history, which is use it as a ploy to reinforce and justify racist beliefs. And American eugenics will eventually be read and adopted by a guy named Adolf Hitler, who will then use eugenics to his own purposes. Eugenics is this false idea of different strains of humanity being entirely different races, with some being superior to others. One YouTuber said, and I believe this to be true, that eugenics is basically comes down to the shape of your skull is 1/4 thick, 1/18 of an inch thicker in this region, and that's why you aren't really a human being, essentially. Whew. All right, we got there. I'm hoping that this will upload. Anytime I've tried to upload anything thus far, longer than 5 minutes, it's failed. I'm now trying it for the first time by using my cell phone instead of using a Chromebook or straight through uh, Canvas Studio, which is the biggest hawk of crap I've ever had to use in my life. I set up a YouTube channel, but it won't let me directly record for several more hours, so I'm going with the stopgap here of using the smartphone. Hopefully, I'll be able to upload it to YouTube here in a minute, and I'll post it to Canvas for you to watch. Um, Please be sure to go onto the message board that I set up under discussion and react to the Chapter 8 discussion before Sunday. On Sunday, I'll be reading your discussions amongst yourselves, and anyone who does not participate will not get their attendance grade for this week. Anyway, I hope you guys are staying safe. As my girlfriend said, if you're within spear thrust of the shield wall, then you are not practicing proper social distancing. Stay safe, everybody. Keep your chins up, and thank you so much for listening to my incredibly jury-rigged um, uh, lesson for this week.